When you think of seafood, you naturally think of oysters. Fried, grilled, or raw, oysters are a true delicacy of the sea. In Alabama, millions of pounds of oysters are harvested from public reefs every year. The how, when, and where of that harvest is strictly regulated by the Alabama Department of Conservation and Natural Resources Marine Resources Division.
In late 2000s, the legislature passed a bill that increased our oyster management. And one of the things that did with the oyster management was establish these oyster management stations.
This legislation and existing regulations are designed to ensure that Alabama's oyster fishery continues to thrive for generations to come. All oysters harvested in Alabama are taken within a designated season, usually between October 1st and April 30th, and must be harvested by hand using oyster rakes or tongs. To understand why regulations are needed for the oyster industry, you first need to understand the life cycle of oysters.
Managing the oyster reef is fairly complex, but it's not that difficult to do it. We place culture material, shell and rocks on the bottom, and then when the oysters spawn, that spat, it needs a hard surface to attach to. So it attaches to that substrate, the shell that we put down. And then when the oyster catcher's harvested, it takes about 2 years for that oyster to go from a spat to a legal size 3-inch oyster.
Prior to the opening of oyster season, the Marine Resources Division conducts surveys of oyster reefs to determine the amount of oysters that should be harvested from an individual reef during that season.
Well, every year we do our quadrat dive transect, and basically what we do is take a meter square down to the reef, and we collect whatever's in that meter square into a bag, and then we bring that on board and process those samples. We count everything that's in there, including small oysters, large oysters, the spat, the juvenile oysters. We'll count how much culch is down there, and we count how many recently dead oysters, we call those boxes, are on the reef.
When the oyster season opens, fishermen are required to leave their identification card at the oyster management station. Upon return, fishermen must purchase sack tags from the management station. These tags cost 35 cents each and must be filled out and attached to each sack of oysters harvested. Hours fished, oysters harvested, and location of catch on the tag provides vital information used to monitor the harvest. These tags accompany the sack of oysters from the management station to the processor to provide tracking information should a problem arise with the oysters. When oysters harvested from one reef reaches the quota set from the survey before the season, that reef is closed and another reef is opened, eliminating the possibility of overfishing. The proceeds from tag sales go toward the purchase and distribution of culch material, essential to the health of the reef. Fishermen are allowed to harvest 6 sacks of oysters per person or 12 per boat per day. Oysters must measure 3 inches across and be sacked in a burlap sack that measures no more than 1/4 of an Alabama barrel, or approximately 75 pounds. Fishermen are required to return all oysters too small and any reef material hauled into the boat back onto the reef. Once the oysters are tagged, they are sold to buyers and delivered to various oyster processors in refrigerated trucks. Here, the oysters are processed by breaking open the shells and removing the oyster. The meat is then washed again in fresh water to remove any shell and impurities. Finally, the processed oysters are weighed and packaged in containers of varying sizes. They are then packed in ice and delivered to markets all over the United States.